Hi, welcome to Stoughton Media Access Cable's Community Forum. My name is Steve Kelley and I'm your host. And today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Mike Bloom. And Mike is a caregiver and has written a book about taking care of people who come into your life when you least expect it. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Steve.
All right. So perhaps we could start off by asking you a few questions about what your background is in caregiving.
Sure. Well, my background actually started in caregiving more than 20 years ago when I entered the field supporting people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. I started in the field supporting people in a group home, adults with autism. And that set forth my career from a direct support professional standpoint to working in administration, leading residential, rehabilitation, family, and vocational supports for people with disabilities. But about 5 years ago, I got drawn into family caregiving because my parents were getting older. My father had been serving as the primary caregiver for my mother, and at the time, they were both 82 years old. And all of a sudden, my father had a catastrophic heart failure event, and I needed to step in to care for both of them. And as an only child, I jumped into the pool of care, as most caregivers do when there's a crisis in the family, and never looked back.
So now your dad was taking care of your mom, and what was your mom's ailment or condition?
Sure. So back in 2004, my mom, actually at the age of 77, was diagnosed with stage 4B lymphoma. She had Hodgkin's disease. She actually collapsed in a grocery store. It was unknown that she had the illness because, as a lot of people who are older, some people have a high threshold for pain. So she went through chemo. Actually, the oncologist that was treating my mom thought that the chemo might kill her before the cancer because she was so weak at the time that she was diagnosed.
Right.
So she decided to go forth. My mom was a determined woman. She went through the treatment. On the other side of the treatment, though, she became very frail. So although she kept her mind, chemo's a poison. So it left her on the other side of treatment with neuropathy, in the feet, and very weak and frail.
What is neuropathy?
Neuropathy tends to be a condition that a lot of people get, especially as they're older, where they lose certain feelings in their feet. So therefore, it's related to balance issues. So if you walk without support, you can easily fall over. So prior to the cancer, my mom, I'm from a Jewish household, and I was fortunate to have a Jewish mother, but who spoiled me greatly as an only child. But she took care of everything for my dad and I, and everything within the household. But after her surviving cancer, miraculously, she could no longer do anything physically. So for the next 5 years, my dad became her primary caregiver in the sense that he was helping her with household chores, all the management of things in the house, physically taking care of the house, and actually physically taking care of her and helping her with bathing and other issues. So one day back in 2009, I got a frantic call from my mom. I lived only 5 miles apart at that time in my own home, but she said that my dad was acting very strangely. When he got up in the morning, and normally he would get their breakfast and their morning medication, he seemed confused, and when she inquired about it, he got angry and stormed out of the room and walked away, which was very uncharacteristic. My dad was actually a retired chemist. Everything he did was by the book, as prescribed, on time, without any variance. So when I got this phone call, I couldn't figure out what was going on, so I rushed over to the house. It was early in the morning. So as I'm driving in the car, I'm thinking, what could possibly be wrong? Because I talked to my parents often each day, and I had a conversation with him the night before, and he told me, he had gone food shopping and banking. He actually got me extra groceries because, as I said, they like to spoil me. And so I couldn't figure out what could possibly be wrong. So when I got into the home, I briefly checked on my mom, and she told me where he was. He was in his home office. I went up to find him, and when I walked into the room, I knocked on the door, it was closed, and a faint voice said, "Come in." And when I walked into the room, he was kind of slumped over in his chair, and I asked him how he was, and he said, "I don't know." So I called 911. The EMTs came out, and we discovered that he had a heart rate of 25, so they took him to the hospital. He had a heart failure event probably in his sleep that started in his sleep the night before. They implanted a pacemaker, but the unfortunate thing that happened as a result of his heart failure event was he ended up with vascular dementia. So from that day forward, he would almost be like a mid-stage Alzheimer's patient. He no longer had his mind. He no longer had short-term memory. So obviously he could no longer care for my mom. So as an only child, I put my career aside, and with my professional caregiving background, committed to supporting them through their journey of what they would need in terms of supports for their illnesses.
Boy, I can only imagine how difficult that was to go. And it's first of all courageous of you to commit to that, but to then have to take care of, I think, taking care of adults is perhaps more difficult than taking care of children?
In many ways that could be, and I'm not alone. I like to equate when family caregivers jump into their role, it's almost like approaching, we're getting close to summertime now, not too far away. Swimming pools will start to open again. And I don't know about you, but when I approach a family pool or a public pool, I dip my toe in the water first to test the water to see how it is, to make sure it's comfortable before I jump in.
Yeah.
There are 65 million caregivers in the United States today. Most of them end up falling into the caregiving role accidentally. A medical crisis takes place, so like as the situation with my dad, or parents give birth to a special needs child, or somebody suffers a traumatic brain injury from a sporting accident or other accident. And then something you may not know is of that 65 million caregivers, we have 1 million family caregivers in the United States right now that are caring for injured veterans that have returned from Iraq and Afghanistan. 1 million people. So I'm not alone in what I did, but the reason I brought up the swimming pool is when it comes to testing the waters before, you want to make sure it's comfortable before you get in. When it comes to a crisis in your family and your family needs you for help, you don't have time to test the waters of care. You jump into the deep end, you don't think, and your life is forever changed. You just jump in feet first, whatever the temperature is, it doesn't matter because you're all in for your loved ones. And there are millions of Americans around the United States that are engaged in care today.
So you ended up, no doubt, in some substantial frustration. And from that was born a book that you wrote.
Sure.
And the title of the book again?
The title of the book is called The Accidental Caregiver Survival Guide, Your Roadmap to Caregiving Without Regret. And I'd be happy to tell you how the book came about a little bit.
Yeah, tell me about that.
So my dad actually passed away later in 2009 from complications with heart disease. And my mom, I ended up opening sort of my own home-based consulting and coaching business to fellow caregivers and nonprofits. My mom passed on Mother's Day of 2012 under my care. Both of my parents had the ability to age in place and pass or transition with dignity in the comfort of their own home. I made sure supports were in place that I led. A few months after my mom passed, one of the things I will say in using home hospice supports, one of the best benefits caregivers can get is after your loved one passes, because you're entitled to up to a year's worth of bereavement counseling. And when I was engaged in bereavement counseling after my mom passed, because I had enjoyed writing and I tend to converse fairly well, some people think so anyway and compliment me on that, my bereavement counselor suggested I start writing about my experiences a little bit, just to get it out of me as a therapeutic way.
Right.
So I wrote an essay actually called Parent Caregiving Without Regret. And I found a book called The Gratitude Book Project of 2013, and my essay was actually published in that book.
Wow.
And after getting that essay published, my counselor said, you have so much great things going on here. Why don't you consider writing a book? Other people need to know about how to go about, caring for their loved one and taking care of yourself. So that started the process of me writing the book in the beginning of 2013. And months later, I dedicated the book to my parents. It's a living legacy to them.
Right.
And the book is not just about my story as a caregiver, because I've coached other people. It really provides a roadmap for caregivers to use so that they can provide care without regret, because caregivers tend to have two main reasons that they experience regret while they're caring for a loved one. The first one is either due to things they may have passed up in their own personal or professional life. Like I told you, I put my career aside. I made a choice to do that, and I was all in for my parents initially. And what happens is when you go in all in and you put everything else aside, your other personal things that you want to do, goals that you may have had, you can experience regret for those weeks, months, or in some cases, caregivers, especially those caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's, could be caring for their loved one for over a decade. You'll never get those years back. So you could have regret when your caregiving journey comes to an end that you lost in all this time. So the idea is to really show people that you can pursue other things in your life, and it's important to have balance, that you do other things in your life besides the caregiving role. It'll actually make you a better caregiver. And the second piece of regret that people have, because when you and your loved one are walking hand in hand through trying medical appointments, treatments that are very painful, you and your loved one are actually partnering through some of the scariest, the most frightening experiences that we can all experience in our lives. They truly are life and death situations. They're things, so it's understandable that when people are scared, they experience fear. What happens is you tend to lash out at those that are closest to you. So there's a lot of anger that comes about because you and your loved one experience grief along the way as functioning is lost or other independence is lost. So you and your loved one may understandably lash out at one another because we're close. And the idea about, this is to say that's okay. Don't beat yourself up for that happening. Just try to make amends, apologize, realize you're human. And then you won't have the regret of things that you wish you had said after your loved one passes if you recognize along the way that you're both human.
So that's, and that comes right from what you might call from the heart of experience.
Absolutely. I tell you a personal story. My mom was a lovely individual and was somebody who was a doll that was loved by everybody and everybody that could treat her, and I would not trade her for the world. She was the best possible mom. But after my dad passed and, I was living in what was their home because I sold my house and moved in with them, I have very different ways of operating from my father. My father was her partner, but I was her son. So we had that transition phase to go through that. Maybe I didn't keep the kitchen, although I'm pretty meticulous, maybe not as meticulous as my parents were, but I'm pretty meticulous. But there were days that I felt, at times that she was directing me from her chair because she wanted her kitchen managed a certain way.
Yes.
And my dad did it a certain way. So these are little things that come up. There were times that I let her words and direction get under my skin because I was overtired. I was stressed. We were dealing with this, and thinking about the ways the dishes were placed in the dishwasher was a very minor thing to me, but was very major to her in terms of how she managed a household. So there were times I lashed out and felt bad. And these only happened a handful of times, but we had a great relationship. I made sure that each night before I went to bed that I didn't want to feel like there was something that was unsettled between us. So I made sure to apologize. So here's the important thing I bring up. I apologize most every time something like that happened. It wasn't that many. The majority of times that I apologized, she said to me, I don't even know what you're apologizing for. It didn't rub her the same way it affected me. And I guess the thing that I bring up with caregivers when you're under stress, you may hold on to regrets for things that you wish you had said or done that your loved one who's no longer there didn't even experience. So clear the air for yourself. It's as much for yourself as it is for your loved one when you ask for forgiveness.
It seems to me that you should never apologize when you are doing dishes for somebody. I don't care what the reason is. Right?
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that's like, no way. I'm doing the dishes. I'm not apologizing for anything I say. There's a rule, right, in the household, right?
Yeah.
You can tell someone what to do or how to do it, but you cannot do both.
Well, I like that rule, actually. So, and obviously she kind of agreed with it, too, because she didn't understand what I was apologizing for.
Okay. So switch gears with me for a little bit. You are a reasonably educated person. I mean, I think you have 2 masters.
I do, yes.
Can you describe what those 2 masters are and how it relates to your ability to handle this tremendous? You mentioned your mom had a great threshold for pain.
Yes.
But I think that a caregiver has to have an equal threshold for pain in a way of doing sense making around the interactions between the people. So how did your education play into that? Tell me about your education.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And I would say my education was extremely important, but even more important was my direct experience working with other people with disabilities. But the education I have a master, one of my masters is in psychology. So obviously that helped me in terms of dealing with sort of psychological foundations. I concentrated in personality theory. So I understand how different personalities works. When it comes to, I'm also a master practitioner with the Myers-Briggs inventory, the MBTI, which really, it gives you information on how people take in information, whether they're introverted or extroverted, where they get their energy from, how they make decisions. So I realized there is no good or bad personality type. We each bring unique gifts and understand that we have a different way of seeing the world. My other master's degree actually came from the Heller School at Brandeis, which is, I have a master's in social policy with a focus on aging and disability policy, which has really been my passion. So I have a real passion for improving aging and disability services in our country. And we've made great efforts and strides over the last decades, but we have a lot more to do, especially as the population is aging rapidly, with the baby boomers becoming senior boomers, and we're going to have more people older than ever before. So that really drives my passion. Just to give you, I'm kind of a statistical junkie, so I'll share some other statistics here.
Good.
But by 2030, there will be 1 million Americans over the age of 100, unless something catastrophic happens, which hopefully never will. AARP released a study last summer, the summer of 2013, that shared currently for every adult over the age of 80, there are 7 younger people potentially to help care for them. So the ratio is 7 to 1, okay? Currently, as of 2013,
yeah.
okay? Now, you hear a lot of things about concerns about Social Security and Medicare on the longevity with, if those programs can stay going.
Right.
Caregivers currently are providing about $450 billion annually of unpaid support to loved ones. Imagine what that would do to our economy if we had to absorb that in a way, in a paid governmental way.
Right.
So that's already there to supplement. But here's what's going to happen in just a few short years, which is really, let's look at 2030 again. By 2030, which is now only 16 years away, it's kind of scary to say that, right? But by 2030, the ratio is going to be 4 younger people to care for every person over the age of 80. So the ratio will be 4 to 1. By 2050, that ratio will be 3 to 1. So the reason I'm bringing this up is everybody who's out there who's currently not exposed to caregiving, you will be. So all you have to do when you sit in a group, and especially if there are young people out there, which is why I like talking to the younger generation. They say when you enter law school, look to your left, look to your right. 2 out of the 3 of you probably won't be here come senior year.
Right.
Well, if you sit in a group of young people, look to your left and look to your right, probably at least 1 out of the 3 of you is going to be involved as a primary caregiver for a loved one at some point in your life. So it's critical that we provide resources and supports to train up caregivers in multiple generations so they're prepared to step up to the plate, because that's the only way we're going to adequately support our loved ones that are going to need care as they get older or have some other injury or illness that comes about along the way.
So with that as a background, can you weigh in on Obamacare and, how do you feel it's either improved or not improved where we're heading for seniors?
Sure. I think Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, it's too early to tell exactly what's going to happen because it's just happened. But I do like some of the regulations that have been put in to think about new ways of providing health care. One of the biggest things that is coming is digital health. We're in a digital age. That's only going to increase in the future. One of the greatest strains that's out there for caregivers and loved ones is making trips to medical appointments to see the doctor. You sit in a waiting room for an hour or two to see a doctor for a 10-minute appointment, right? So with digital health technology coming in and reimbursement practices that will be coming about, it will be possible for people to have routine checkups with their physicians right in the comfort of their own home with digital technology. These are the types of creative and innovative solutions that there are many healthcare entrepreneurs that are out there today that are creating that will adhere or abide by the Affordable Care Act and actually improve services. Do I think Affordable Care Act is perfect? No. It needs to have some changes over time, but I would hate to see it. My personal opinion is it would not be good to repeal and go back to what it was before without any sort of direction going forward in the future. So we do need to have some guidance and some innovative incentives put in place to help us transform our medical system going forward.
Okay. So now you're a single guy now?
I am.
Okay. As you transition and you become 70 years old, in just a short 50 years, whatever it is.
I appreciate
whatever
that.
it is. But when that happens, or 80 years old, what sort of living arrangement do you see yourself having?
Well, that's a great question, actually, and I've given some thought to that. So, a lot of people, hopefully, a big thing to do is to prepare for your future is no health insurance policy covers long-term care. It has to be a separate plan. So you can buy private long-term care insurance, or you make sure that you save enough money over the course of your life to pay for supports that you want privately. I know along with many other Americans currently, do not want to be in a nursing home. Now, I have nothing against nursing home administrators or nursing home staff. I think they do a tremendous job under the circumstances that they have. But the majority of us do not want to go into a nursing home. So the idea is to really start working with elder law attorneys and estate planning attorneys earlier in your life so you know that you can have the resources set aside to privately administer or pay for your own long-term care supports in conjunction with insurance when you get older. So, and then the other thing too is a lot of people come up with informal arrangements. I'm hoping as a relatively 50 years away, I like as you said that I'd be 70, that there could be other natural supports in my life from other family or others who could step up to the plate to supplement those paid supports to make them last longer. So I think that would be really critical as well. So I think it's a combination thereof. The bottom line is consult with an estate planning attorney, a financial advisor. Start sooner rather than later thinking about your future, because costs will continue to go up. But if it's important for you to avoid nursing home care, you need to get expert advice.
You mentioned the long-term care, and my problem with long-term care is that I have yet to feel comfortable with any provider in what we've seen happen over the last, well, maybe it happened always in history, I don't know, but when you see large companies go under, when you see large financial companies go under and go bankrupt, I'm reluctant to pay let's say a $250 a month premium for long-term health care, and 12 years from now, that company bellies up, and now you've just wasted your resources yourself. So I'm very reluctant and have yet to find, it might be a good show for us, maybe, is if we got someone who could come on and attempt to convince us, we're a viable option for long-term health care insurance. But I've done a little bit of research and not been comfortable at all that with the assurances I'm given, that makes sense.
I agree, and then you also need to make sure that whatever insurance plan that you get that you're paying into, it gets indexed for inflation going forward. Because again, the cost of supporting someone, paying for those supports today will be different than when you may need to institute or implement that plan a decade from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. I think that's a great point. That would be a great follow-up show to have somebody who could come in. I'm not an expert when it comes to long-term care insurance. But I would say for those that are hesitant like you, even instead of putting the $250 into a plan, what you can do is save $250 a month, put it into a dedicated account that will be your long-term care account that you can pull from to pay for those supports privately. So again, you're kind of paying it and growing that money on your own, so it's available as a resource to pay for the services that you want, because then it becomes consumer-directed care. And I really think that's a direction, if people have the resources and the ability to save, to think about doing that.
So I know, I'm going to change gears again with
Sure,
you.
yeah.
Right. I know of someone who's recently found out a loved one has gotten a disease like a muscular sclerosis, muscular dystrophy type of a thing, and they can pretty much plan on having some level of care that they're going to have to institute. What would you say to them? What's the next 3 steps that you would say for that family? And their hope is, we're going to have plenty of time before it gets serious enough, and maybe there'll be some new invention, some new chemical drug that will intercede and maybe stop the problem.
Sure.
But let's assume, not the worst, but let's assume there's a progression. What would the 3 steps that relate to what you've written the book about be for them as they look forward to plan this arrangement?
Well, that's a great question. A clarifying question I would have for you is approximately how old is the individual and who are the family members that are providing the support?
Well, let's say it was a person that was 45 years old,
Okay.
A mom, let's say, who was going to know that she doesn't have the same window that, say, you or I would hopefully have of good health.
Sure. So that's again, that's a really great scenario, and there are a lot of parents and children living in. And again, there are a lot of special needs, parents of children with special needs have this concern through the course of their life, because again, they're there to fully advocate, but the likelihood, because of better health care that's come about in terms of treating people and sustaining lives, most people who have a child, give birth to a child with special needs, can expect that child to outlive them. So they do have this concern. I would say the first thing to do is to really, especially with somebody with muscular dystrophy, is to really have a dialogue, because they're cognitive. They can make their own decisions. So really sit down and talk to them about what would the vision be for themselves in terms of how they would want to live if mom was still not there. And that would guide the conversation in terms of where you would go from there. If the person's going to need some increasing support, mom is going to need to realize that if she wants to have as long a life as possible and not get, when you get somebody who has a new diagnosis with an illness, the first thing that tends to happen is you go into this negative thought process, because, why us, why me? dark cloud, the things that you thought about for the future. As I mentioned, grief happens along the way.
Yes.
Grief doesn't just happen when somebody passes. Grief can happen, when you lose a job or you lose a dream, such as if you have a
Yep.
dream for your child and they're no longer as physically able. So if you could realize that it's understandable, again, that you have that fear and that you have those concerns, and really talk openly about it, share your concerns and fears, get them out, don't hold them in, be open. Find somebody who's a trusted supporter that you can talk to, whether it be somebody else who's supporting a loved one. There are plenty of support groups out there that have parents that are taking care of children with special needs. Seek support from others to share your story, because then you won't feel so alone. The biggest problem that caregivers have when they first jump into the role is they try to be Superman or Superwoman and take care of it all, and that's not a sustainable pathway. I did that initially with my parents because I had all this great background, as you mentioned, from professional, and I've had direct work experience supporting people with disabilities.
Yes.
And I'm an only child. I tried to do it all. And that was not a sustainable pathway. And the reason I bring this up too is actually about 3 months after my dad passed, I came down with shingles. And I know that was because of my stress.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so seek additional support outside of yourself. Don't stay isolated. Talk to other people who are already coping with that specific diagnosis, illness, disease. Get that type of support. And then the third thing is really start developing a future vision. So, and again, I would find some, there are special needs attorneys out there, elder law attorneys. I would find somebody who has a good recommendation so you could sit down and make some planning, put plans in place to start the process of what types of supports would be in place for your loved one after you pass. So you make sure that all those things are set up, appropriately, because there are such things as special needs trusts, which can be set up that can help safeguard money in case you, mom, when you get older, end up in a nursing home before your adult child with muscular dystrophy is going to need support, so you can preserve those resources. Right. It's vital to have those types of dialogue. And again, add others to your support team so you can be open with those discussions. So that's several of the suggestions I would give.
All right, I want to just take a break for a minute and ask Roy. Roy's our producer, and Leo McGowan is our cameraman in the background. I was wondering if Roy could put the contact information up for Mike, so that if you have questions for Mike, you could, here we go, and I'm going to read it to you. Bloom Coaching and Performance LLC, 774, with parentheses around it. I noticed, Mr. Roy, 226-0755. And that's www.bloomforcoach.com, michael@bloomforcoach.com, and then on the website, www.theaccidentalcaregiverssurvivalguide.com. So you can get a hold of Mike. You'll accept a phone call, and would it be like a free mini consultation in the beginning?
It would be my pleasure to give any viewer of this program a free consultation. So people could certainly call up or send an email, and we'll get a 30-minute appointment set up for you.
Wow, that's great. So let's, do you remember a movie called The World According to Garp? Remember that movie? So let's talk about The World According to Mike.
Okay.
In The World According to Mike, what changes in elder health care living arrangements would you say would benefit all of us? And let me precede that a little bit with the thought that currently I'm working on an in-law apartment for myself. We're going to take our house and lend it over to our children and with their kids, and we're going to build the in-law and move into that. So we're going to take the smaller piece. So, and I'm recommending that, as to me it seems like a great idea, because now we can babysit now, and there's some hope that we'll, have more connectivity later. Not that I ever want to be a burden, but so with that as a precedent, what about The World According to Mike? What should it look like?
Oh, I think that's fantastic to do something like that. And many of us, how we grow up now and with our families is much different than maybe 2-3 generations ago. It's not, before it wasn't uncommon for families to sort of stay in the same town or the same area. So it would be easier for people pulled together. Now that we have a more global economy and jobs are taking people to different locations, they tend to leave where they grow up. A lot of caregivers enter the role in a long distance situation. And actually, that was even true for me, because before, it was interesting, before my mom had her collapse in 2004 in a Walmart, My parents were living in the Washington, D.C. area, which is actually where I grew up. I had been living in Massachusetts for about 10 years prior to that due to professional reasons.
Right.
For a few years, I had been working on my dad because my dad was hesitant. He was originally from Massachusetts. He didn't want to come back because he liked being down south.
Okay.
But my mom and I worked on him to make the move because I wanted them closer as they got older, not knowing that this would collapse and all this was going to take place.
Right.
So they came closer. So they got relocated. They lived about 5 miles apart when that happened. And then after my dad had his problem, I actually moved in and we set up a living space for me in their basement. So we kind of did it in reverse. So I had my private area, but they had their house as they had had. I think it's wonderful for families to start planning about how to pool living situations and resources because, again, the world, according to Mike, would be try to spread your money, your resources as much as possible and create living situations that are doable for everyone. Not every adult child in a family is capable of being a caregiver. So have open, honest dialogue, especially if there are multiple adult siblings. A lot of conflict can come up. But I think if there's open family meetings and discussions to plan how that could work and why it would work and try to get everybody on board, if you can pull people into one household, you're saving resources that could be put into additional supplemental paid supports. Because as you move forward, there are home care agencies that you can find that can provide as little as 1 hour of support at a time. So if you need somebody to come in to do a bathing routine or help administer medication or supplement your care that you're giving while you go off to work or do other things. And I would also think the world, according to Mike, because I'm real big on digital health and the technology that's out there, look at putting in place smart home technology, which can actually track your loved ones so that if you go to work and you're concerned that your loved one may be starting to lose their cognitive ability or other things, you can actually put monitoring systems in your home that can track if an oven stays on too long, can track where your loved one is in the house, can give verbal reminders to a loved one to take medication. One of the biggest issues that results in elderly people getting hospitalized or having a serious issue is wrong medication administration.
Okay.
Either not taking their medication as prescribed or over-medicating themselves.
Right.
So you can put some safeguards in. If you supplement your physical care with other people coming in and technology, you will sustain yourself to be able to do it for longer term. And it's less costly than institutional care. You know, some people that are going to assisted living are paying $3,000, $4,000, $7,000 a month for care. Can you do something that's equivalent to that within your home and keep people together? You might be able to and make the money last longer.
Yeah, and that would be a much preferred alternative to be with family, and I think you might ease the mental pressure that might be part of what creates anxiety and tension.
Yes.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, in other words, if you have a lot of anxiety and tension going forward, it would seem to me that might precipitate maybe not necessarily a stroke, but just sort of a more stressed countenance, a more stressed persona that would lead to more readily to, say, a medical condition.
Absolutely. And another thing I would say, too, that a lot of families may want to consider if they're pooling resources and you know, having elder parents move into an in-law apartment, which I think is a great model. If you want to get other friends and family members involved, there are ways to set up free online support communities. One that I recommend to my clients is lotsahelpinghands.com. It's a free service. It's LOTSAHELPINGSHANDS.com. You can actually set up an online community where you can communicate with people via email. They have a calendar function, so if you need help taking people to medical appointments, the loved one you're caring for, you can get friends and other family members to sign up and actually take it. It's a whole communication system that a family caregiver could use to monitor. One of the biggest stresses that happens with family caregivers when they're caring for a loved one is each and every time something happens is having to make 10 to 12 phone calls. That takes a lot of time, there's a lot of burden. If you can streamline communication, it can make it more effective. And this is something that many of my clients have found useful to help streamline their communication that I bring up. And the other thing is, don't think that your children, a lot of people want to shield children from some of the hard things that are associated with caregiving.
Yes.
And decline or decompensation of the person, the older person. I say that's not right. I would, in the world, according to Mike, would involve children, because children can uplift people, and a child can provide respite support to you, the primary caregiver, by engaging in fun activities with your loved one.
Right.
You know, they can watch a football game or play checkers with grandpa.
Yep.
And while they're doing that, and grandpa is well engaged and happy and thrilled because his grandson or granddaughter is with him playing, you go about doing your other business. That's caregiving, too. They can be involved. So I say get people involved from multiple generations, make it a team effort to support the loved one who's in need, and you'll make it as pleasant as possible.
That's good. Could you address the word decompensation? I'm not sure I understood what you meant by that.
Sure. So decompensation can mean decompensation in terms of physical or mental ability. Decompensation means decline.
Oh, that's already happened
decline.
for me. That happened a long time ago.
So decline, so losing certain skills. So
Yep.
people, as they become older, tend to lose physical abilities
Yep.
or mental abilities. So a person going through the journey of Alzheimer's or different forms of dementia can actually experience a decompensation over time of the ability, to feed themselves, the ability to remember to take medication, decompensation in the mind where they start to act out. So that's what I mean by decompensation is the decline in ability.
I'm glad I got clarification.
Sure,
on that, 'cause
absolutely.
I wasn't clear. I don't know if the audience was clear. So you had mentioned that you have a professional coaching business.
I do.
Tell us about that.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I provide coaching services to individual, family, and professional caregivers to work with them either one-on-one or in a group to help them with practical strategies that are really tailored to their individual family situation, so they take care of themselves along the way and avoid burnout so they can sustain their role as a caregiver for the long term. Because whether you're a family caregiver or a professional caregiver, the focus of support, rightfully so, is on the patient, the loved one, or the client. The caregiver often gets left out. So the idea of my coaching services is to work and partner with the caregiver. So when the caregiver talks to me, it's confidential. They can be as open and honest as they want. They can, if they need to, let their feelings out about how frustrated they're feeling or how, angry they may be at other family members that are somewhat involved. We can help them work through those issues and, and reframe the situation so they feel better about what they're doing and take care of themselves along the way. And the primary thing to know as a caregiver is that self-care is not selfish. Taking time for yourself, respite support, getting other support to come in and care for your loved one so you can get out and do activities that you enjoy, that will help you engage in this journey of care without regret so you can have more energy. You'll be better for your loved one in the long run. The other thing that I offer too that I'll share now too is I offer actually a free monthly caregiving power hour via teleseminar that I just thought about to share here over the phone. And I now have caregivers calling in globally to get support. I actually have one coming up. It happens once a month. The next one is actually coming up this Sunday. People can learn more about the Power Hour at caregivingpowerhour.com. It's free registration. If you can't attend the call live, I send out a call recording to all registrants. The next guest that I have is actually, I tend to bring in guest experts. I have a guest expert coming in this weekend to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia care and how to effectively lead supports for a loved one with Alzheimer's.
Wow, so you're, as you move forward in this process, you're also building a sort of a knowledge base, even with your interviews and things like that.
Absolutely, because there are many, many experts out there, and there's so many people with a passion, and many people that are really, working and coming up with new ways to support our loved ones and actually patients in hospitals to make the quality of care better. And I think my goal is to really try to bring together as much of that information as possible and share it with the caregivers who are out there that need it. When I first entered the role, I felt very alone and isolated. And one of the reasons I actually launched the Power Hour on Sunday nights once a month is most people on a Sunday night, they get a little depressed because the weekend's coming to an end and they're about to return to work on Monday morning.
Yeah, right.
When I wasn't working and I was caring for my parents, I got depressed on Sunday night. I called it the Sunday night blues because I wasn't going to work the next day. And I was facing a week of appointments and all kinds of things that were coming up, and it got me down. So by giving this once a month energy boost with practical ideas, support, strategy, and people can ask questions, the idea is to let them know you're not alone in your role. We're here to support you. Let it out. Get out your frustrations. Get your questions answered. And enter the new week realizing and being proud of the choice that you're making to serve as a caregiver and move forward.
Yeah. I would also illuminate that my wife works in healthcare, and I see it degrading terribly. I mean, we're aware of how people were cared for in the past.
Absolutely.
And now with the skilled nursing facilities having the challenges of getting paid in different ways through insurance, the care is really far and away more confused, less quality, and a short vignette. I've met a couple of nurses who had just retired. They were 65, and they kind of hang around together, and they were joking with me about how they used to give rub downs to all of their patients. And when they brought in the younger nurses to tell them and show them how to do it, the younger nurses said, "We don't give rub downs. That's not part of healthcare." When in fact, it was part of healthcare. It was something that a nurse could do to make someone feel better, and now they don't do it. So that's a small example, but healthcare is changing, and it appears, at least the inputs I'm getting, and I'd share with the audience if someone wants to come on and say I'm wrong, that I'd be happy to do a show for that, but it seems to me that healthcare is dramatically going down in quality, and that has got to impact all the things you're talking about.
It does, and that's a macro or a global concern, with healthcare, and I understand that. There are many reasons for that. A lot of organizations that are in healthcare, they're thinking about, unfortunately, the bottom line, the dollars. So the ratios in some situation of patients to a nursing staff may be smaller than they used to be, and greater. They used to be caseloads, maybe greater in others. But I think we can make a difference at the micro level. One of the great lessons in life I always got from my mom, which is to try to be positive with people no matter what level they're at and be supportive. So for the most part, she got excellent care, I think because people wanted to support her. So I think a great way to do that is if you're a patient, have an advocate who is your loved one too, that goes in there, but talks directly with the frontline staff, who tend to not even be the nurses, but the nurses' aides. So while the nurse may not have been giving the rub down, I actually found nurses' aides when my mother was in the hospital were applying lotion to her body and things like that. Yeah. But I think it was because of the extra sort of nice things that we did to make them feel good about what they were doing. So they went that extra mile. There are individual heroes or great people within the healthcare system. The importance is to keep building them up because there's, again, I say for nurses and nursing staff, you're dealing with patients who are in extreme pain and discomfort. Again, you're even dealing with some of the most stressful situations that are out there. So I think the greatest way to improve the healthcare system is to find ways to work as a team. If you're not finding your loved one is getting the support that you would prefer or desire, seek out a patient advocate or a case manager, have a dialogue with them. Because again, at times, unfortunately, we do need to be the squeaky wheel, right? To get the grease. Sometimes you have to raise those concerns. So put on that advocacy hat and do it, but do it in a respectful way.
Right. So what do you see as the future of the kind of caregiving that you recommend? So where does it go from here, like house caregiving? We go to a, what did you call it with the high-tech? Monitoring?
With, smart home technology, digital monitoring, yes, to have that. If people want to stay at their home. I guess the thing that I want to say is there is no one size fits all. So when I talk to caregivers and families who are making plans, it is what works best for you. I shared at the beginning of this interview what worked best for me and my parents in my situation. I do not expect other caregivers to follow a carbon copy today of what was in my book. Every person is unique. Every family situation is unique, resources are different. The idea is to understand the choices that you may have and choose the best possible pathway for you, and then be willing to make adjustments along the way. So if you have the resources and the loved one and you as a caregiver are committed to keeping them in your home or their home, then I would seek and research technologies that will help you do that in a balanced way. And they're only getting better. And some of them are not as costly as people may think, and is certainly less costly than institutional care would be. But monitoring, I think, is really a great way to do this, and I'm hopeful for the future that more people are going to start to put into place telehealth technology so that you can have regular doctor and nurse consultations from the comfort of your home, without actually needing to go in and travel to that appointment.
And that would be just awesome, wouldn't it? It would avoid all of the taxiing people, moving people that had difficulty with their
Exactly,
movements. That
exactly.
would be, and especially in New England with the weather often.
Yeah, it becomes
uncooperative.
real tough. You know, as I said with my mother, and when I was taking her to appointments, mobility was a really difficult thing for her. So had a transport chair and all of that, you know, to take her and things like that. But I was relatively healthy and young to be able to do some of these things. But, you know, if you look at many caregivers, they're spousal caregivers, where the caregiver who's taking care of the loved one, they're both in their 80s. My dad was 82 when he was in the midst of caring for my
Right.
mom. And he was doing all of that physical stuff. In fact, I even think, as I bring this up, that perhaps we never expected my dad to pass before my mom. But one of the things that I think happens is caregivers sometimes pass before their loved ones because they stress and burn themselves out and overtax themselves
Right.
and don't even realize it. So if we could find a way to ease that burden a bit, and I think telehealth is going to be a big area in the future for that.
Wonderful. Hey, I wanted to get your book.
Sure.
I'm wondering if we can grab Leo. I want to say thank you to Leo McGowan. He waits patiently in the background and does a lot of technology for us. And I'm looking to get a good show for Mike of the book. And I'm wondering if Leo we can switch cameras with Roy, and then we'll see what the book looks like. So the Accidental Caregiver's Survival Guide. And what's the subtitle? You have it memorized.
Your roadmap to caregiving without regret.
Your Roadmap to Caregiving Without Regret by Michael Bloom? Is it
Yes, it's A. Michael Bloom,
A.
and
Michael
you can
Bloom.
actually find the book on Amazon, but on the preview site, on the information that was given about my personal information, there is a special website for the book, which is the title of the book, the Accidental Caregiver Survival Guide.com, and if you go to that site, you can actually get access to free preview chapters so you can test drive the book before you make a decision to purchase on Amazon.
I just love the way you have this idea of you put your toe in the water, you test drive, and I think that would be great for almost everything we do in life, that if you could test drive it first, you wouldn't have these regretful moments. And I also like the idea of what you've said about children, and I firmly believe that children are so much more capable than we give them credit for. Even at age 2 going up, I mean, you can really talk quite straightforwardly with a child and get their help in situations that you wouldn't have anticipated.
And they want to help.
Yeah, because they sense what's going on around them and things like that. So, yeah, I think that's terrific. Well, what I'd like to do is I'm going to ask Roy if he could roll the credits. In the meantime, while I'm going to read the credits for the show, you can perhaps be thinking of 2 or 3 things that you wished you'd have gotten on the show that you didn't. So if Roy is ready, we'll get the credits going. So I'm here visited with Michael Bloom, Bloom Coaching and Performance, LLC, 774-226-0755. Feel free to give Mike a call. He's very generous with his time, as is obvious. www.bloomforcoach.com. Michael@bloomforcoach.com is the email. And www.theaccidentalcaregiverssurvivalguide.com will get you access to a couple of free pre-read test drive chapters. So that would be great. We'd like you to be aware of NAMI Walks, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Saturday, May 10th, 2014 at the DCR's Artisame Park, 1255 Soldiers Field Road, Brighton, to raise awareness about mental illness and to stop the stigma around mental awareness. www.namiworks.org/Massachusetts. Contact Karen Gromis, 617-580-8541. So the crew would like to thank Maxie's Delicatessen, Maxie's, 117 Sharon Street, Stoughton, Mass, 781-341-1662. And they're a very big supporter of our show, and we really thank them for that. And the American Cancer Society is looking for volunteers to drive cancer patients to and from treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662, www.cancer.org. And that relates, having people drive you to places relates strongly to the messages that we're hearing from Mike right now. Also, Ilsa Mark's Food Pantry and St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher, who was our guest last week, by the way, 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549, and you'll find a kind heart when you make that phone call. Meals on Wheels, ask for Jessica, 781-344-8882, extension 2. So you can help out, or if you need help, do make a call. The Stoughton Penny Savers, a great supporter of Stoughton Media Access Cable and the Community Forum Show. Their slogan is, "Our business is advertising your business." They're over at 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. And the International Forum Show, which is Roy Cohen's a wonderful sort of a brainstorm, and he interviews guests with local roots, and he goes throughout the world via Skype. So if you have somebody from Stoughton or the local area that's doing some fantastic stuff, we'd love to interview them. And we run those shows Sunday at 8:30 p.m., Monday at 11 p.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., Thursdays at 9:30 p.m., and Saturdays at 12 noon. You can jot down those dates. You'll see those on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. And Foley's Backstreet 5K, second annual 5K road race to benefit the Mass Hospital School, which does great work. Sunday, it's May 4th, the start and finish at the Mass Hospital School, 3 Randolph Street over in Canton. For more information, call 781-297-0100. And the Stoughton Farmers Market, which is going to start up in June on Saturdays, will now be located at the First Parish Universalist Church right in Stoughton Center. Come on in, come one, come all, come see the wonderful goods and the farmers, sometimes organic food, sometimes regular food from the garden. That's at 790 Washington Street in Stoughton Center. Saturdays, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's rain or shine. I think June 7th is our first starting date. This is a non-profit effort. It's completely volunteer run, and it really does benefit the whole community. I believe we have 3 farms, 2 bakeries, and you'll have some live music as well each time you come. So come on down and have some fun. The Community Forum showtime, so you can catch our shows in Stoughton. I like that you can see us at the same time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m. So this show will probably be airing. You're watching this show at one of those times, perhaps. Mondays at 8 p.m., Tuesdays at 5 p.m., Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 28. We'd love to hear your comments and suggestions. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. So we'd love to hear your emails. If you like the show, tell us. If you don't like the show, tell us. If you don't like me, tell us. All right, communityforum1@yahoo.com. Community Forum in Easton, Monday at 9 p.m., Tuesday at 8 a.m., Wednesday at 3 p.m., Saturday at 10 a.m., Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 22. We'd love to hear from our Easton people who watch the show. We'd love to put more Easton shows on as well. So do contact us, communityforum1@yahoo.com. All right, so I'm back with our guest, Mike Bloom, who has written this wonderful book that engages you and gives you advice on how to provide health care. It may or may not be elderly. It could be just a circumstance for someone that you love that needs your help. And I wanted to give Mike a little more time to say the kind of things that he wished he'd have said just before just before he got off the air. So what are you thinking about that?
Sure. Well, it's a couple of things I'd like to say. One is this is April. April is Autism Awareness Month, and I just want to give a shout out to all families who are caring for a loved one with autism. That is a lifelong commitment. My first job in the field, serving as professional caregiver, was working in a group home supporting adults with autism. Everything, despite all the education and academic background that I'm privileged to have, the best lessons in life that I learned that helped me in caring for my parents was the time I spent working direct support with people with autism. Currently, 1 in 68 children are being diagnosed with autism. So it's really important that we pay attention, and I encourage people to look into the resources that can help support children and families with autism. The other thing I wanted to share is actually a chapter in my book and my mantra, which is put chocolate in your pill box. And the reason that I share that as a mantra and a chapter is when we are embarked in the journey of care, we tend to be so focused on all the things, the required tasks and responsibilities to take care of our loved ones. Medication is one of them. And we're so focused, and I know when I was caring for both of my parents, I was managing 2 pill boxes and made sure everything was accurate and given on time. But the reason I say put chocolate in your pillbox, the chocolate is a metaphor. As caregivers, we often don't take time for ourselves along the way. So it's vital to think about things that bring you joy in your life, put them in your calendar, dose yourself regularly with them, and that will sustain your energy to provide the care for your loved one that you can be proud of.
That's wonderful. What about like regulations that are coming up, new things that the state might be doing? Are you aware of anything that, something that is coming up for new legislation or regulations that people should be aware of?
Not in terms of family care, I'm not aware of that, but certainly if people would like to learn more about what resources are out there, I'm all about free resources. Eldercare.gov is a great resource for people to access to provide and help them locate services and supports in their area.
Right. What if someone was, say, not in this country? Have you thought about the reach that you might have, or the kind of thoughts that you might put out to somebody who's in Paraguay, for instance, or in Spain? Are you aware of what those countries are doing?
I am, and to a degree. And as I said, I've since my book came out, and it's the first book that I've published, I've been very fortunate as people have really enjoyed the message. I was just interviewed on a radio show from Melbourne, Australia a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Which was great. So I'm definitely having more of a global reach. And the reason I'm having a global reach is caregiving is a common issue. And I think it's really coming more to the forefront. So although I may not be versed in what specifically is happening for care resources in a certain country, the common issue of supporting the caregiver and making sure they're taking care of themselves along the way and mapping out, I believe each caregiver knows the answers within themselves. It's just having somebody to talk to help them facilitate them coming to the solutions that are best for them and their family. So it doesn't matter what culture or background they're coming from, we can process that. So that's what's unique.
And so the global challenges, you would almost make them similar to the local challenges? I
would, and the main challenge that caregivers have, despite of what the resources out there that can support them, is how they manage their own energy. And that's really what I'm about talking about with them is what they're doing for themselves, to care for themselves along the way. Again, like to put chocolate in your pillbox, and to find and plan for other resources, informal supports, like I mentioned, lots of helping hands.com. There are probably, that technology can be used anywhere. It doesn't have to just be in the US because it's all by internet, email. So you can actually use that anyway to manage supports. So it's about managing informal supports that you can get from your friends and family members. That's where the best type of support will come from.
Yeah, well, we're down to our last minute.
Okay.
And it seems like you've covered the subject very nicely, strongly indicating to people who are ready to encounter this kind of a challenge that you have to take care of yourself if you're going to take care of someone else.
Yeah, after you jump into the deep end of the pool, don't stay there for long. Seek support. It's out there.
Seek support. There's lots of support. Go on the web. Go to various government sources. In Stoughton, by the way, we're having this interview. The VNA is it's one of the few communities in Massachusetts with its own VNA.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
You
I'm glad you came in. I think the audience will find this to be a particularly poignant interview, and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. It's been a pleasure.